Hey, it was a couple months ago when I promised I would give you the story of how I actually bought the boat. Things have gotten pretty crazy in the world since then, but I think it's back to a level where at least I have more time to do this kind of thing. So, welcome aboard again. This is big news, my 1978 Chris Craft Corinthian. If you haven't seen my tour, go ahead and check that out because I'm really proud of the way it turned out, and y'all seem to really enjoy it too. This is how I decided to buy my own boat. My very first boat, by the way, is a pretty enormous cabin cruiser. So I dove in head first. Let me tell you how I came to that decision. So it all started about a year and a half ago when I was signing the lease on my apartment. And I started thinking, there's gotta be a better way to do this kind of thing. If I owned my own house, for example, I could be spending that kind of money toward a mortgage, but I didn't really like that idea either because I didn't like the idea of the bank getting involved. And I don't know exactly how it happened, but something in my brain just clicked. What about houseboats? I'd never been on one, I had only seen them, and when I thought houseboat, I was thinking of those long, like 60-foot pontoons that are not exactly the style I wanted, but I didn't know there was any other option, so I started looking at cabin cruisers, namely like Bayliner type, so higher end, nearly to what you would actually call a yacht. And I was thinking, this is pretty cool. What can I do to make that happen? And the prices weren't that ridiculous, but they were still outside of what I wanted to pay. But I knew that if I came up with a good budget, I could make it work. So now that I knew it was going to make sense, I had to figure out how I was actually going to buy it. So I did the numbers, and I figured out if I ate pretty much literally nothing but ramen noodles and water for a year, I could save enough money to buy a boat. And so that's what I did. For an entire year, I was the most boring person. Ask any of my friends. I never went to hang out. I never went to concerts or shows or traveled or anything. I just saved money for my boat, and it happened. I pretty quickly moved away from those brokerage sites I was looking at to more private sellers. I was looking at places like Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist, and I learned the individual search terms on each site that I could use to pull up boats that I liked. It ended up being words like liveaboard that you wouldn't expect and you wouldn't know to type in if you just started looking, but that term liveaboard ended up being how I found this boat. I looked at two other boats before looking at this one. The first one was only about a month after I started looking, so I still had a long time before I was ready to buy a boat, but this one was in my price range and it looked like something I might want to buy. So that one was definitely a trawler. It was very utilitarian, and I'm glad I didn't buy it because it would have been an enormous amount of work. It probably would have turned out well, but for the price they're asking, it was ridiculous. They were asking more for that than I ended up paying for this boat. So I'm very glad that I did not go with that one. The second boat that I looked at was on the very far end of the spectrum. It wasn't expensive. It was literally $1. Yeah, apparently someone had abandoned it at the marina, and they needed to rip up the entire marina and build a new one. And so they needed someone to just buy this boat and take it. And I was this close to being the person to do that. Again, glad I didn't, because it was a $1 boat. I'm pretty sure the keel bolts were leaky, and so there was about 2 inches of water underfoot. The engine did not run at all. It was a tiny sailboat, which was not in my plans at all, but again, $1, how can you go wrong? The worst part about it was that it was stuck in mud. Yeah. Again, I was willing to overlook a lot of things for that price point, but the amount of labor that would have to go into rescuing this boat was intense. But I did see that they did sell it to someone who's going to use it and get a lot more value out of it than I would actually, because I wouldn't have lived on that boat for very long. I would have just bought it, moved it, rebuilt the engine, and sold it. So I'm glad that didn't happen either. So third time's the charm. Almost exactly 1 year ago today, I looked on Facebook Marketplace, and I was actually visiting my parents at the time, and we were watching a movie, and I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace, and I saw a picture of this boat. And I immediately said, that's the one. Out loud, I think. And I showed it to my parents who I was visiting, and they agreed. That's an amazing boat compared to like all the other junk that you've been sending us. And what was even better was the price. The only problem was it was stuck 600 miles away in a landlocked lake. No way out. But it was worth a shot. If it wasn't going to be this boat, I knew it was going to be a Chris Craft Corinthian. After seeing all the pictures, I knew this was the boat that I wanted. There were no other listings for sale, except maybe in Washington State and California, which that would be completely out of the picture. So I said, okay, I'm going to go and visit this Chris Craft, make sure this is the type of boat I want. So I went up. The owner was not there for this visit, so he had two of his friends show it to me. They were extremely nice, and they showed me around, and they answered all my questions. I was going crazy the whole time. They were great. They just answered my questions as best as they could. Of course, there's a lot of stuff they didn't know because it wasn't their boat. But when I saw it, I knew more than ever that that was going to be it. I wanted that specific boat now. So I went home, I thought about it, I called the owner, and I set up a time to meet him on the boat. He lived in Alabama, I lived in Florida, so it was a long way for both of us to get there. But I made sure that he knew I was serious, and we met up there. I had made some calls to movers. I had found some people who quoted me around $3,000. More on that later. But the bigger hurdle was when I met with the owner, he told me the boat doesn't have a title. That was a deal breaker. And I was legitimately heartbroken. I had invited my whole family up there because I thought we were going to sign the papers that day. I was prepared to give the money. I was prepared to buy the boat that day until I learned that it had no title. Long story short, we were able to find a way to give it a title. I'm not going to give all the details because that's way too long of a boring story, but that was maybe the most creative I've gotten with any kind of big problem like this in a very long time. But it worked out perfectly. It's completely legally titled and registered in Florida now. And that was a minor miracle that we were able to make that happen. Very grateful for all he did on his side to make that happen, and I did a lot of work on my side to make that happen too. So it's time for the third meeting, and this time instead of us both going to South Carolina, we met in the middle, and we went to the Gulf Coast. I think it was somewhere near Mobile. We met up outside of a bank, but the bank was closed that day. I handed him the cash. He handed me the title. And that moment was pretty surreal. The one thing he forgot to give me was the keys. So he called me about 20 minutes later, and we fixed that. So now, I owned my first boat. It's enormous. It's heavy. It's 600 miles away from home, and there's no way to drive it out of the lake. So I called the movers I had talked to earlier, and they didn't remember me or something like that. And when I told them the details again, they basically said it was an impossible job, which was weird. But when they finally did say that they could do it, they quoted me about 3 times as much as it was originally supposed to be. Yeah, so now I had a problem. I needed to find a mover. I needed to find someone to disassemble the top of the boat because I didn't know it before, but the boat is too tall to go on the back of a trailer. It would hit the top of bridges and stuff, and it needed to be taken apart. And there was only one person on the entire lake who had the equipment and the expertise to do it. And if you're ever in that situation where you're trusting and putting all of your eggs in one basket for one mechanic, good luck to you. He took his sweet time. He took a lot of money. I do not recommend his services, but it got done. Yeah, that's about all I have to say about that. Moving it, though, was good. The truck driver was very good. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see the boat on the back of the truck going down the highway. I really wanted to, but it didn't work out. But I did go visit it the night that it showed up at the marina, and that was amazing. This is me and my brother in front of it, and that was a crazy moment to see that in person. And we saw just how much work we had ahead of us. So I took 2 days off of work and worked from 8 in the morning until 8 at night. 2 days. I'm so glad my brother was there. Joseph, you rocked it. That was amazing. Could not have done it without you, legitimately. Maybe the hardest I've ever worked in my life. And you were right there with me. So thank you again. We moved the fly bridge with a forklift and a team of people. I can't even describe this. I tried to have the camera rolling, but that was not priority. We were routing cables and hydraulic connections underneath into a cable route while this 500-pound piece of fiberglass was hovering over our heads. That was wild, but it worked. Then it was another day and a half in blistering heat with no bimini, no cover, no nothing. Attaching all the railings, all the carpeting, getting everything in place, and ready to drive it from the dry dock into a slip. But we're not done yet, because that slip didn't allow people to live on their boats. It was an insurance thing, I understand. So that was just a stopping over point. But it was the first time it was in Florida waters, and we overcame so much stuff to get it there. Like, it's, again, I've said it before, it's a minor miracle that we got it to that point. So I still had two or 3 months left in my apartment. I think it was 2 months left in my apartment to get the boat ready to live on, ready to move. 5 miles, I had a new marina lined up for it to go to, which is this one right here. It says, spoiler alert, we made it. The 5-mile trip from the stopping over marina to this one, I keep saying the word miracle, but it really was a feat that the engine was able to go as far as it did, because I haven't mentioned it yet. Both engines had major issues. I kind of knew it when I bought it, but they started up. Things got worse. I nailed it down to a cooling issue after a lot of learning. And in the meantime, since all this, I have completely rebuilt the portside engine from the outside. I have not opened up the block, but I've replaced literally everything you can from the outside. And it runs beautifully. And you've seen it in the old video. Here it is again. It's just such a beautiful sound. All the work I put into that, I'm really proud of that engine. What about the starboard engine? That's a bigger project. And that's a project for next time. So I'm going to be rebuilding that engine starting today. And when it's ready, I'll have a video for you detailing everything that went into rebuilding the starboard engine. So for the first time, probably in 10 years, this boat will have 2 working engines, and you'll be there to see it with me. So, stick around if you want. Thanks for listening. I hope you learned something today. It makes a lot more sense than you'd think to live on a boat, but it does take a lot of work. So, that's it for now.